Welcome to the Structural Modeling video conference for January 2019. Today we're going to be talking about a wide range of subjects, mostly focused on the objectives of structural modeling, some of the fundamental components, and then drill right down into specific activities, roles and responsibilities within the structural modeling, interpretive modeling area. And then from there, drill right down into proposed software requirements and information management associated with each one of these roles. And today I have started with this collective intelligence presentation from the European Union, where they have used Warfield's interpretive structural modeling approach to look at the process of focusing a large group's information, goals, objectives, and onto a specific problem, and how that can be effectively used. This basically is put together with people that are specialists in psychology and in working with large groups, and they focused a little bit on the idea of complexity and where people get overloaded, where they lose the bubble on these fairly complex interactions of large groups of people. And one of the things that they focused on was the three types of languages that are used that are within the structural modeling area that was invented by Warfield. And they use words, graphics, mathematics, and these, or a combination of these languages to explore and express very complex ideas. One of the things that hasn't been emphasized in the past, we emphasized it in our software modeling report we did the last time, the fact that we use the mathematics to reduce the amount of resources necessary to get the information. So if we're using an empirical question-answer type of research approach, getting information from a large group, then what we want to do is we want to be able to do that with a minimum outlay of resources to minimize the cost. So if you have a situation or a relationship that allows you to effectively use logic, then the mathematics of structure allows you to use the mathematics to reduce the number of questions and interactions that you ask the people. It becomes very efficient. But many relationships don't fit into that logical approach. And so what we said in our last technical report 24, was then if you can't use the logic to reduce the resources, then you simply need to ask the people in the group directly, and then have other types of information management resources to help you manage that data, correctly understand it, record it, log it, so that you can capture that information. And what that practically means is, and as we pointed out in the report, was that instead of doing pairwise types of questions that you can use when you're doing the logic, is A bigger than B and B bigger than C. Those are pairwise, and those are very good if you have the proper type of relationship. So we developed the AMEI and the concepts of local and global relationships as attributes to say, okay, if you have this specific type of relationship, then you can use the logic, inference, and reduce your resources. And then we say, if you don't have those, then you need to actually ask the people not a one-on-one question, but instead of saying, well, is A bigger than B, you can ask, like, what influences A? You can open that up, and the people know that. The people in the group have that information. You don't need to take them through it item by item. So you can just ask, and then once you get the answers back, you record those, and then work the process from there. So that's one of the primary things that's never really highlighted when people talk about the different languages. And the function of mathematics is to help with the logic and reduce the resources. So we're working along the lines to actually implement a process by which you can make a distinction and select the right pathway forward. Okay, so then what is collective intelligence? So it's an integrated design process. And then in design, where you have lots of people, lots of specialties focused on bringing the information together, it's difficult to set initial conditions and the overall meta process or overarching controlling system that allows you to incrementally learn as a group. And that is what structural modeling is designed to do, is to actually help you do those things.
Questions?
Many, many aspects involved in that. So, sure, Jack.
Oh, there it is. I couldn't. I'm having difficulty with this notion of collective.
Okay.
As contrasted to distilled intelligence.
Okay.
Because collective intelligence, particularly the way the UN described it, signifies consensus.
Okay.
Which is quite different from the scientific method of fallibility investigation.
Okay.
So, and well, I think Warfield tried to get at that when he emphasized in the question the notion of significantly influences or significantly so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that because the group that's participating is not homogeneous. They have different backgrounds, different levels of knowing, etc. And so somehow we've got to capture the opinion of everyone, but put gradients on those opinions based on how qualified the people, each person is to be judging the issue. Does that make sense? It
does make sense, Jack, and one of the things that I'd like to point out, and this is the collective intelligence. This is just kind of an approach that is being used, I think, out of Ireland, and it's just one application, and it's to a point where we can look at different aspects. But when we are talking about these processes and the technologies we have the technology now to do the things that you talk about.
Yeah.
And we can run all those other analytical types of computational processes in parallel. We can have a group of 50 people and we can have everybody in the background rating everybody else, and you can have those displayed on a dashboard or not. You can do all kinds of things like that that weren't really available technology-wise when these techniques were being developed. And so what I hear you saying is, yes, these things can be done now. And how would that impact our approach? How would that impact our implementation? And that's exactly the questions that we want to ask and want to explore. So,
well, but the point I'm trying to make is that the use of the word collective, many people take that to mean consensus.
Right, and it's simply what was used in the EU, and it can be difficult. And so as you get a specific group of people together that want to talk about this, then they would need to make sure that they understood each other. But to me, it's just a group. What is group intelligence, or what is distributed intelligence, or that word collective could, in my mind, be many different words to.
Okay, unless there's a real need to use the word collective, I would encourage us not to use it.
Okay. Well, I just pulled up this,
I understand.
Work by Michael Hogan, and your comment is well taken. I think that this is. I think still that the goals are to help participants develop understanding of key issues, establish a basis for thinking and working cooperatively. You can take collective out of there, and produce framework for effective action. Right. And really, the last one here, this one, to produce the framework for effective action. That's what I think is really the most valuable aspect of what's going on.
Well, but you see, your second bullet, establish a collective basis.
Yeah, we can take collective out of there.
Okay.
It's not a big deal, the word. And so we have the group methodologies, right? Generating, categorizing, structuring, sequencing, and developing agendas. They're all fairly straightforward approaches. And these methodologies aim to prevent under-conceptualization, avoid cognitive overload, allow informed choice-making, enable clear communication, and promote positive group dynamics. And the choice-making or the decision-making is interesting here, but it's the informed choice-making. This is one thing that I think Kevin Dye has emphasized over and over again, is that if people vote, start making choices without having dialogue, without having some interaction or being able to establish some semantic, clarity, that the choice making is very poor, and they make very poor choices. So,
and to that point, I would suggest instead of allow informed, it would be to ensure informed choice making.
Okay, all right. Well, this is just kind of an introduction that I wanted to go through, and then switch over now to the handbook of interactive management a little bit, and talk about. Let's see. Make sure I have it up here. Well, let's just go right here to this page right here. See if this is it. Nope, that's not the right one. So, number of different windows up here. So pick the right one. Try this one. Okay. So we have the Chapter 5 of the Handbook of Interactive Management. And this is something that where we have your roles, responsibilities for people that are participating in the interactive management process. And so these are the people that would need to have, or these roles would need to be implemented or tracked in the, software, in the structural modeling software. So, and the idea is to determine exactly what type of information, how much, what level of detail do these people need to have available in the software. What are their activities specifically? What needs to be available to them from computer support? And of course, I've marked out videotape operator because almost every cell phone and almost every computer has at least 2 or 3 cameras in it these days that are automatic. Display arranger, mark that out because we're going to have computer generated graphics. And scribe is a recorder, mark that out because everything will be recorded in the database that we're talking about now. What are these specific roles and responsibilities here?
How did it get in the database?
Well, I'm not sure that so what we're doing now is we're talking about the requirements, the information requirements, or the operational requirements to design a database. We don't have a database yet.
Well, so an internal support role, whether you call it a scribe or not, has to be some way of capturing what any one of the end participants said and getting it where everyone can view it.
Right. And so essentially my assumption is that everyone now participating in this process will have a computer and that they will each individual will type that into their keyboard, and that keyboard will capture that and put it directly into the database. And then there will be a facilitator or someone that can select that out of the database and display it on the screen. So that essentially that, I think that in the material that Kevin provided for what they did with the UN and those 5 continental engagements, everyone was working on their own personal computer. And that's the kind of the way I see it, the distributed database interface.
Well, we have experienced that when you get a working group together, you have your choice of having them focus on the topic and one another, or become computer operators.
Okay.
And it's pretty well known that I think that you can't have a human being do both anywhere near as well as to do one or the other. So it's very important, therefore, to let the participants focus on the topic and the group interaction and relieve them of any other manual activities.
Okay, well, Kevin's here. Let's ask him what he thinks. Well, so let's think about that for a minute. So then we have people, let's say, that are generating ideas, right? So let's say we have 30 people in a room, and my understanding with the nominal group technique is it's called a nominal group because it's not a real group. So you have 30 individuals in the room and they're all writing things down individually. And so when they write down issues and so forth, then they're not focused on the other people in the group. They're focused on writing things down specifically that they're concerned about. They're focused on that. And so that's what I'm saying. Well, we'll take and then instead of them writing those down on paper and then handing it to someone and someone taking that paper and putting it up on a big screen where that everybody can see it, or write it out on a flip chart, just saying, when instead of writing it down on paper, they put it into a keyboard, and then you can manage it after that. Does that make sense?
Well, not to be kind of, not quite, you see, because having them write it down puts on the wall. Well, anyway, the way we have done it, which John thought was very useful, was having the participants, item 5.1.4, speak about each topic, and a scribe write it down and put it on the wall.
Oh yes, I think, yeah. So there's a,
because in that process, other people can ask questions about, what did you mean by this word, or what are you really after there?
Right. So yeah, so there's a sequence in the process. So step one, if everybody writes it down, right, and then step two is everybody's stopped writing now, and they've collected these questions or issues, and they're talking about issues one at a time, right? So that's, I think we're talking about different parts of the process, Jack.
No, no, we're not. I'm saying that you're saying that they write it down, and I'm saying that that they write down is their note to themselves about what they want to be put on the wall. But they do not write down the thing that goes on the wall. Somebody else does that. Somebody else does that after everyone is through writing their own notes to themselves.
Excellent. That's exactly what I'm saying. So that there's, instead of writing the notes to themselves on a piece of paper, they do that into a computer that goes into a database.
I give up. I give up.
Okay.
You computer jockeys can get people focused on the keyboard all you want.
Well, that's so basically then in that case, the information, what's the information loss? You know, where do we capture the information? How do we capture it? Where does it go? What's its value?
Jack, your microphone is off.
You need the 533 and 534, the scribe and the display arranger. Your participant should not be doing those activities. I'm
trying to say that the participants won't be doing that activity. But that's okay. We can move forward through this process and check out different ways of doing it. You know, we can test different ways of doing it once we get it put together. So anyway, the idea is basically then to go through and look at what type of information needs to be captured, how should it be captured, and how should it be displayed. So the external roles themselves, how much of that information needs to be put together. What information you need to capture. I think that one of the things that Kevin brought up when he was talking about a activity they had was that the client failed to properly notify their participants and wanted to have the IM contractor or the IM facilitator manage all that piece. So in this particular case, then this helps clarify who's doing what. So what does the client have to do? How much of the administrative process of notifying people, where it's going to be, how should they prepare, who do they need to talk to, those types of things. So we take that information and get it outlined into a process, and that's communicated clearly to everyone. And so I think that would be a valuable process to be able to have it well defined. And then, of course, the professional roles of the planner, the facilitator, the pattern interpreter, and the report manager, these, again, are other activities and roles that we need to assign information requirements to. And those are the things that basically that we will be designing the database to support. So are there any further comments on that? Okay. So we'll go ahead and take a look at a little more detail of the Handbook of Interactive Management. There you go. Let's see. Let's stop this one. And then we'll bring this one up. Okay. So this is page 8 of the Handbook of Interactive Management. And then goes through and talks about, after the components, the people and the role of responsibility, talks about the products. What will those look like? And what I'm beginning to see now, looking at available computer support systems like Tableau and Microsoft Business Intelligence and the RStudio and things like that, they have many similar types of graphic displays. They have many similar types of components that you can put together into a dashboard to approach certain problems. The things that they don't have is they don't have the specific algorithms behind them so that these specific displays mean these specific things, like a problematique or a delta chart or a curriculum structure. A priority structure, that's pretty common. The quads, of course, those are not available in anything yet, any open source software. But many of these other things are, with the ability to quickly generate types of custom reports and custom graphics. So that capability is increasing every day. It's just amazing what's going on. And then the processes, so that it's going through and actually doing the idea writing, the nominal group technique, Delphi, all of these types of activities, the information generated in these activities, we'll want to have the information system capable of managing that information. So Jack brought up earlier, maybe there's a way that instead of having the people go ahead and type those into the keyboard, you can simply do voice recognition and do a transcription. There's a tremendous amount of capability to do that now, so that you can just capture their voice, put it into text, and have it automatically put into a database system. So that would relieve the responsibility of the human being for doing any typing at all. They would just be talking and interaction, and then we could have other technology that's capturing that. So there's a wide variety of technologies available that could be used for that. And we think that's a good thing to think about, is to not overload the participants, so that anything that we could do with advanced technologies would be great. So
I want to be clear. You are the software that you're intending. You intend to support the whole IM process, not just the ISM phase.
Exactly. Yeah, this is an expanded, an augmented type of software. Yeah.
All right. So
Yeah, and it's that's and so what we want to do, actually, what I want to do with the architecture of this system is to make it an open, modular type of microservices base, so that it's not locked in. One of the things that has been really kind of interesting to me is that the capability with the standard data analysis tools today to interact. There's got some very well-defined common data exchange formats that work very well in just gathering massive data sources together and manipulating them. But those are only a service, right? And so you have to be able to go identify which services you need, bring those together, and then assemble your system. If you have a closed standalone system, it can't take advantage of any of these other modular services. And so what we really want to do is look at a modular architecture that allows us to support this interactive management technique, structural modeling techniques at various different levels, and plug things in and out as necessary. So that's kind of the big idea.
okay. The thing that's missing here is John emphasized that groupthink and clanthink and non-think are pathologies to this process. And so in his work, even though he does not call it out here in the IAM process, very early in the IAM process, as people are putting their ideas on the wall in the nominal group technique, we mathematically check for indications of groupthink, clanthink, and non-think. Because as you bring a group together, it may turn out that group members, certain members of that group, are dedicated to ensuring that the group never reaches a conclusion.
Yes, of course.
All right. So really the shortcoming here is back in 514, the participants. And we need to be more precise about how many of what kind of participants. For example, you frequently say 30 or so people, but if you go look at Rudolf Starkerman's work, it's pretty clear that a group of more than 12 people typically wastes a lot of time or leads you to the wrong conclusions.
Right. There's a lot of issues with complexity. There's a lot of issues with just overload and semantics. So the balance, the outcome of the work would be to explore these different techniques and different tools and see if there can be ways to alleviate these complexity barriers and to increase the understanding and shared semantics within the group, so that when they do come to the point of making decisions, that they would have a better chance of understanding each other. And so
I'm asking for some software from you that helps a skillful facilitator make sure they have a group that will not descend into clanthink, groupthink, or non-think.
Okay, so let me see if I can break that one down. So the idea would be that the metrics, the cyclical metrics, that were used to determine those types of the calculations that were used to determine whether or not you have groupthink, clanthink. You want to have a system that will calculate those, will query that and calculate that?
I need some help as a skillful facilitator.
Sure.
I need some help in selecting the group in 5.1.4.
Oh, okay. So then,
in our experience, for example, when you go into corporations, the vice presidents want to have a meeting. They don't want the janitor in there. But as John has emphasized, you see, you have to have a decent variety of perspectives, or you're going to end up with groupthink.
So that then what you have is when you're engaging an organization of some kind, you want to have guidelines by which they select the participants and be able to rate and rank whether or not they'll have an effective outcome.
Yes. And you as a software developer need to understand the operational activity that you're trying to aid. The task of writing software requirements includes the task of specifying what you think 5.1.4 attributes are.
Yeah, okay. So those are to me are very, very important aspects of this. I think and as we're going through this, I'm getting a little bit better idea of what some of the operational considerations are, and that's good.
So in the IM process, the facilitator typically has 1 to 3 meetings with the stakeholders before this formal IM process even starts. And and those meetings clarify the variety of participants in 5.1.4 and specifically clarifies what the issue statement is going to be for the session.
Okay.
And so, John, that's well described in the IM handbook. But what we've found is that it would be delightful if some bright software guy could give us some criteria, give us some sort of decisions, source selection tool.
Yeah, that's interesting because, as a side note, we were looking at Dave Ullman's decision accord tool yesterday, and he demonstrated that specific type of capability within the tool to allow mapping. So the people that were selecting the group, I have a candidate group, let's say I have a group of 100 candidates, I'm going to pick from that pool, right? So you have, let's say, 4 people that are doing the picking, right? They can then use some kind of tool like Dave demonstrated yesterday to help them with that and to look at how that works. So that's the tool that Dave demonstrated yesterday would be kind of a service that would help you normalize your semantics within the group that's doing the decision. In this case, the 4 people that are tasked to pick, 15 or 20 people from 100. And it would record all that. You can, and once it's recorded, that's really great. But similarly, with the vast, ubiquitous amount of computing power, you can also, as I've mentioned before, have parallel types of computing algorithms running that are feeding you back information on multiple different tracks. And you can choose to use that or not. So I think that there's a rich area here that for interaction to create software architecture that can do these things. It's just a matter of picking the right architecture, understanding the space a little better, continuing to have conversations like this, Jack. I find this very valuable because I get somebody with a different point of view that looks at this and emphasizing the things that you're emphasizing is very, very important. So I'm glad you're doing that. So as we go through and look at these things again, bar charts, right? We look at here at bar chart, uniform program planning, and linked matrices. No one does that in any of the commonly available tools today, but bar charts are done by everyone. Profiles, I think, are done by everyone. And so what's happening now within the business support software is there's a growing number of these generic tools that are used by specialists that have access to vast amounts of data, and they are tasked by the executives in the corporations to get information to help the executives make decisions. So that's not exactly structural modeling, but there's a lot of overlap. And so I think that if structural modeling software is created in such a way that it can fit with these tools, then we'll have a much better chance of having a larger group of people understand the value of the approach. So let's see. Anyway, so we got going through here. Then we get to the chapter 9, the software. We've looked at that pretty much before, but the software here is basically just the logical piece, and we're talking about writing something that's information management and decision support for the whole process. There will be, of course, the logical piece that we've discussed extensively in the past. And so then we get to the planning phase, right? And the planning phase will have specific information generated by specific actors. Go through those. Most interesting, budget, schedule, staff, other roles. And so these are the types, and here's the triggering questions and the generic questions, right? Processing, sequencing. These are the types of things that we'll want to be able to capture that information and manage that information correctly. So we'll taking some first cuts at that as we go forward. This document is very detailed, stepwise. So I believe it's a good format to start with for design requirements for information management. And that's kind of where we're planning on going. So but not going to try to do everything at once. The first part that we were going to do was just simply go back to this idea of, let me change my screen here and go back to the idea of here, or who are these people? What are their roles? What information do we need to capture about them? And do they need to have access to the database or not? Do they need to have a login? Do they have do they have the ability to add things to the database? Do they have read-only reports, whatever, things like that? So what I'm going to do right now, in the next step, the plan is to just focus on people, get them authenticated, have a fairly simple type of data structure to start with, feed that back, get some more information, get that reviewed, and then improve it as we go forward. So with that, we're about 45 minutes in. Are there any questions? Any other comments? Okay, well, good to know. Let's see. Let's go look at the bring this one up and just briefly go through this process a little bit. Look at technical report 24 again just for a minute. Oops. Okay. Oh, that went away fast. Try this. Try it again. Try it again. All right, everybody should be seeing that. All right. So one of the things that we ran across when we were doing the literature and verifying and validating our approach and verifying the approaches that were published, what we found was that we could, there were systems that we could reproduce, and there were others that we couldn't. And so in looking at the difference between those two is one of the primary drivers that made us create the AMEI for the logical attributes and the concepts of local and global relationship. So
let me be clear. You now have shifted from the idea of a software that will help do the whole interactive management process down to the specifics of interpretive structural modeling.
Well, this is the specifics of the ISM software right here, right?
The ISM, interpretive structural modeling.
Yeah,
not the IM.
Yeah, so right, and so that's true. And so what we're trying to say here is because of this, what we found out about the ISM software is the reason we wanted to expand it out to the whole IM structural modeling process. Because we believe that we can provide computer support for the larger process when we are using relationships that do not create a reproducible system structure using the ISM, the GMU ISM software.
I appreciate that, and I think it's wonderful that you're pursuing this. I just when I have asked people to participate in this dialogue, they simply get immediately confused about the scope and purpose of the project that you are conducting. And I don't think that's your fault. I think that's just because they have not thought about the systems aspect enough. But at any rate, we need to make clear to people that there's software support for the overall IM activity, and then there's the specifics of this ISM in which we get at the structure of whether a system works or not.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, Jack. So, and then there's also the larger thing that wraps around the IM, which is decision analysis, right? So there's these layers, and so expanding it out, hopefully we'll make some things to support that. And so that's kind of want to emphasize that a little bit, but then the other part, so this is just kind of re-emphasizing the properties of the logical relationships that if you have the proper properties, you can have a reproducible ISM. All the other properties, you need to have a different type of approach if you want to have it reproducible.
Yes.
So that's the basic idea here. All right. And so these types of graphs here will probably not be useful to people that are not trained to understand them. These types of graphs with the more of the structured graphics, there's a wide range of these now. And there's a wide range of tools that can generate these, and we can do many different versions, aspects, emphasize different parts. So what we would hope to do is that within the larger context, when we're dealing with relationships that are that basically are non-reproducible, that at least we can have a range of automatically generated structural models. They may not be the same names as Problematique or Delta charts or things like that, but they may have some of the same attributes. And we would focus, the goal would be to try to specifically reproduce them, just depending on how difficult it is to do with the current software and how capabilities and how much resources we have to do it. But it's becoming more and more, the software is becoming more powerful to do this. And so these types of activities, types of graphics, are fairly easy to generate these days. And that's basically where we're going to be moving forward, but we'll be talking about and so here basically is what we want to talk about in asking the question. So is element A relationship to element B? So we go element to element, and if you have the right type of relationship that has the right logical properties, you can do this because you can use the inference to eliminate eliminate many of the questions you'd have to ask. But if you don't have the right kind of relationship, then you can still ask a question, but instead of asking element to element, you just ask what elements influence. And in this case, we're not relying on the logic to guide us to ask the questions to get the empirical data. We're relying on the group knowledge. And that in itself, we would have, so for each element, I'd say I had 10 elements, then you would have 10 chances within the group to make sure that you got a connection between those. Because every time you ask the question, what elements, you're opening it up for all the other elements for the people to understand. Say, oh yes. And so that seems to be an approach that would be useful. And so a basic difference here would be that we would have a standard ISM approach for certain types of relationships. Then we would add this other type 2 algorithm that we would apply to other types of relationships. And those would be two completely different, there would be two different components in that logical area of the software. And you could plug or play them, either one.
Can I come back a minute to previous paragraph? You used the singular, the relationship between A and B. And in fact, there are multiple kinds of relationships between A and B. Perhaps upwards of 19 different kinds of relationships. So that really should be plural. is element A, relationships, element B.
Okay, well, there's right now we're doing this one at a time because it's important that the specific relationship that we're talking about has the proper logical properties. And so we need to not only have the relationship name, the pros, we also need to align the logical properties with it. And I agree that there's a lot of other relationships going on, but we've selected one to look at. We want to look at them one at a time. Within the art approach, we have multiple matrices that can support multiple relationships, but I don't want to start out that way. I believe I understand what you're saying, but I'd like to do it with one first and then demonstrate that capability and then go to the next. So,
well, my point is, I understand that, and I think that's sensible. But what I want to point out is that up front, we identified elements A's and elements B. We gave ourselves a vocabulary of elements to pay attention to.
okay.
We must also give ourselves a vocabulary of the relationship types to pay attention to.
Okay.
And then for a given interpretive structure modeling exercise, you can use one relationship, but that means that you may have to repeat that ISM n times if there are n significant relationships.
Yes, exactly. And what we want to do is be able to explore that with different types of relationships. And the discriminator for the different types of relationships is the logical property. And so, and other information that we've gotten from the group, right? So, yeah, that's the idea. That's kind of the big picture. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left. And would you like to provide any comments, Kevin? Okay, well, let's say we have the next 2 weeks out. Let's see when that's going to be, the 5th, so it's probably January the 19th, and then February the 2nd. Anybody like to present something on January 19th? Okay, I'll announce what the schedule will be for the 19th and the 2nd. The 2nd, we planned on doing an update on the where we're going, the capability of the software at that time, get some more feedback, and I really appreciate the information and the discussion here about this approach. I believe that it is quite difficult for people to understand what's really going on if they haven't been into and looked at the different aspects of ISM and structural modeling. And hopefully it'll become clearer as we go forward and produce more executable software and are able to support more processes. And with that,
I think you're on a wonderful track. I would suggest that you give yourself a little challenge project. And that is, let us presume that you are going to tell us how to organize a small system engineering project.
Okay, what I'm going to do, Jack.
How would you go about
Yeah.
deciding how many of what kind of people should be on that project?
Okay. That's a good point. What I'm going to do right now, though, for the next phase, is I'm going to focus on the database requirements, authentication of individuals, and how I manage a generic individual. Then whatever you need to do to specifically identify and acquire that individual, then we can look at that later. Because every individual has certain generic characteristics that we need to get into the database. So, yeah, that's interesting.
You just said that you.
Oh, your microphone's off, Jack.
You've just said that you want to get on with programming because there'll be so much debugging to be done.
Okay.
You are not looking at the requirements for the software you're trying to build.
Okay. All right. Well, I
I
was saying that my next incremental objective is to implement authentication and identification in a database. And so that's what individuals, once they've been identified, they need to have some way for them to authenticate and to identify themselves so that they can have access for their role in the scenario in the database. So that's kind of what I'm going to work on. All this other stuff is really important, but I just want to focus on that one specific function right now, see if we can get it going. Any other questions? Comments? Right. Well, hope everybody's having a great New Year, and we'll have a chat on January 19th. We'll maybe an open session, may not. If anybody has anything they'd like to say.
Yeah, Joe, thank you for this week. I'm just on my way through an airport.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Bye-bye.
then we'll catch up with you a little later on.
Happy New Year, Kat.
Happy New Year, Mary. Happy New Year, Jack.
Hi there.
Okay. Well, we're going to stop the broadcast.